Hi, and welcome to another episode of Piano TV. So today we are going to get into the 12 problems that I see adult beginners face at the piano over and over again. And this is a part 2 continuation video. So the first half of the video we've already done. We've talked about 6 of the problems, and then in today's video we're going to talk about 6 more problems. And we're going to get a little bit into like some of the psychological problems, because that's where a lot of adults struggle, is just like kind of that self-talk and the, just issues and fears we have around performing and stuff like that. So that's going to be the focus of these 6 problems. But just so this isn't a super negative video, we're going to talk about the problems, but we are also going to talk about some possible solutions to those problems, so we can end it on a good note. Anyway, let's get started. So problem number 7 is the drill sergeant in your head. It's that voice in your head that always berates you and says you're never good enough, that you suck, that was bad, try that again, work harder, you're a weakling, that inner voice that just kind of keeps us down. A lot of us are super hard on ourselves. It's like our inner voice is a drill sergeant. So we can never please that part of ourselves either. So like no matter how hard we try, we're never going to get like a pat on the head or like a job well done. It's just always, that voice always pushes us to do more and more and more without ever giving us like a feeling of satisfaction, no matter how good you get. The solution for this that I find works really well in my own head is think about how you would treat someone that you care about. And would that voice in your head, with all that negativity, would you ever talk to, your significant other that way? Would you ever talk to your child that way? Like, I hope not. And if we do, we usually feel really awful about it afterwards. So you want to, when you care about someone, you treat them with love and kindness. At least that's the intent. So it's always so much easier to do that with other people than it is to do with ourselves. But it is so crucial to do it to ourselves. Like, we are our own worst critics, and we're always really hard on ourselves. So I think you just have to look for that inner kindness. Treat yourself the way you would treat other people. It's not that we shouldn't push ourselves, because obviously the drive to improve keeps life and piano interesting and exciting, but at the same time, I think it's a good idea to fire your inner drill sergeant and be a little kinder to yourself. So speaking of criticism, problem number 8 that I see a lot is being overly sensitive to criticism. Like, it's obviously one thing to constantly berate yourself internally. Obviously that's a really bad thing, but it's another thing entirely to reject all criticism as a personal attack. Now, this is like, I'm calling the kettle black or whatever you say, because I'm horrible at receiving criticism. I can be really sensitive to it. It can make me feel like really defensive. And a lot of adults, I find, have a difficult time receiving criticism. So I like comparing this to how children learn. So if a 6-year-old draws their B backwards and you tell them that, they're not going to be like, they're not going to, well, most kids wouldn't get too upset about it. They just fix their B and then life moves on. But if an adult draws their B backwards, what we are prone to do as adults, will make excuses, we'll defend it, we'll apologize, we'll say things like, oh, I'm not thinking clearly today, or oh, I'm really tired, or they'll make a joke about their inability to draw a proper B. And as adults, we're just really naturally uncomfortable being wrong or making mistakes. So it can make us close our ears to anything remotely resembling criticism. So the thing about criticism is that it makes us feel really vulnerable, and as adults we really struggle with vulnerability. Like we like being in control, and we like knowing things and not knowing things, and not being in control and being vulnerable can be a really uncomfortable feeling. So when you're learning piano, you're just automatically thrust into this situation where you are vulnerable and you don't know a lot of things, and it can feel super, super uncomfortable, like trying to navigate, like being blind, or, navigating in a dark room or something is kind of what I feel like. And as a teacher, I find that it can be a really delicate situation with my students, because if I say something like, that was an awesome performance, but we got to work on the counting in bar 18, a lot of the times the reaction to that from teenagers and adults is defensiveness. They'll oh yeah, I knew how to count that, I just like there's a tendency to make excuses or to feel bad. And I'm just gonna go out on a limb and assume your piano teachers aren't trying to make you feel bad and point out all your flaws. We're just trying to make you better piano players. But it can be very hard to do that with with sensitive adults who kind of recoil anytime anything remotely resembling criticism happens. I think the real solution to this problem, and it's a challenging one, is just awareness. Becoming aware of this natural sensitivity that we have. And I don't know that it's possible to like completely be just like disentangled from your performances so that you don't get emotionally affected by criticism. Like even now, if I play something for Michael and his response is anything less than enthusiastic, if he's like, oh, that was good, but he wasn't like, that was amazing, then, you know, I start getting insecure and I start wondering like, oh, did he not like it? Or did I, you know, did he notice all my mistakes? And it's amazing how even when you've been playing piano for so many years, this isn't just a beginner problem. This is like at any stage of the learning cycle, we can be plagued by these doubts and these fears. The goal is to learn how to listen to that criticism without all of our feelings getting entangled in the process. And it's really difficult to do that. But just, you know, becoming aware that this is an issue, I think is all we really can do. Problem number 9, being too stingy with your piano education. So what I mean by that is that sometimes we can be like really precious with our hard-earned money, and, you know, maybe we don't have a lot of money. So we try to cut corners where we can. And in piano, that might mean not buying music books. And this is something, I don't want to like force people to spend a bunch of money, but I really do believe that having a nice collection of books, even if it's just a few, is so much more valuable than just, say, printing everything off of the internet. Even like from a convenience standpoint, internet music seems convenient, but then when you're like trying to wade through a pile of papers that you've printed off, it's like super inconvenient, and you know, the papers get worn down easier than books and all that. So maybe I just love reading books more than the average person, but I wanted to share a personal anecdote with you that will be relevant. I promise we'll circle it back around to music books. Last year, let me back it up even further. I've always really liked reading, but throughout most of my 20s, I actually didn't read very much just because, you know, I'd like get books from the library sometimes, but usually it was just like too inconvenient to get books because I didn't have a lot of money. I couldn't really like just go and buy books whenever I wanted. But last year, I made a pact to myself. I was like, okay, I have a Kindle. I have access to books whenever I want, basically. And I'm not going to be cheap with myself. And I made a pact to myself that anytime that I found a new book that I was really excited about, I'd buy it on my Kindle. I can afford it. So it's like, there's way worse things I can spend my money on than something that's going to like, you know, educate me and stimulate my brain. So it's not that I have anything against the library, but I think for me, the biggest thing is that I go through bursts of inspiration. So, you know, one week I might be really into a certain topic, but then if I have to go to the library and I have to like order in the book, then it might not be like a month until I get the book I wanted to read originally. And by then maybe I'm like not as interested in that topic anymore, or I'm interested in something else. So being able to kind of like have quick access to the things that I'm like immediately interested in means that I absorb more information. I'm more engaged in that which I'm reading. So that's one of the main reasons that I've started buying my books as opposed to just getting them from the library. But circling that back around to the music world, I found that in the past year, ever since doing that, I ended up reading a lot more books, and I was a lot more excited about it and passionate about it. And I think the same thing applies to having piano music books. So the solution for stinginess is pretty obvious. It's just to invest in yourself and invest in a few well-chosen music books. Like, we spend so many hours with these pieces that we learn in these books that they almost become like sentimental friends. I don't know if any of you feel that way. Maybe I'm getting a little too like personifying my books a little too much, but I really do like feel a personal connection to a lot of my books. Like, so I have like my Beethoven Sonata book. I remember exactly when I got this, and I remember like this book brings me back to, you know, living in my tiny apartments in Toronto and just starting my own, like, you know, independent piano teaching, not in a company. And I just remember like long summer walks to Bloor Street to Remenyi Music, where I used to buy things like this. If any of you are from Toronto, maybe you know that. But I just don't find that you get that kind of same personal, sentimental connection to sheets. I just don't feel like they have as much meaning or inherent value. And it seems like such a small thing, but I actually think it makes a really big difference. And again, I'm not like encouraging you to go waste all your money or anything, but just like even a few books, just like a small investment, like I think it's a really powerful shift. Problem number 10 is being close-minded about what you want to learn. So I think we're going to go off on another little tangent here. But you wouldn't just, if your 5-year-old was like, I hate all vegetables, you wouldn't be like, okay, cool, that's fine. We will never eat vegetables again. Like, it doesn't make any sense, right? Because they're good for you. And kids have such a limited palette of experiences to draw from. Like, they just don't really know their tastes, and their taste buds haven't developed. So one thing that I've learned along the way and in cooking is that apparently, I don't know if this is a fable or if it's true. It's been true in my life. If you try something 12 times, that's as many times as you need to taste a food to be able to judge it objectively. Because a lot of the times, the first time you try something different, you just kind of reject it because it's weird and it's strange. And the only way that you can truly objectively analyze a new food is if it's no longer new, if you've had it, up to a dozen times, and then the weird factor goes away. So I remember one time when I spent a good part of the summer on the West Coast. I was in Portland, I was in California, and it was there that I saw my very first fig. Now, growing up in Saskatchewan, there's no figs here. Like, they don't grow anywhere nearby, and I don't think they travel well, so you never see them in the stores. So when I found a little container of figs at Trader Joe's, I was so pumped up because figs are kind of legendary. People who like figs, really like figs. So there I am. I just buy them. They're super expensive, and I'm so prepared to love them. But then I didn't. I ate this fig, and it was stringy and kind of mushy, and they're not very sweet. And I was kind of like, this is disgusting. But I knew at that time that you had to try things a certain amount of times to get over the weird factor. So the rest of this trip, I kept buying figs. Whenever I found them or wherever I came across them, I would keep exposing myself to figs. And they did grow on me. Once they stopped being weird, I started to appreciate little things about them. I started to enjoy their texture and enjoy that they're not super sweet and stuff like that. So I did get over the weird factor with figs, and I will never say they're one of my favorite fruits. I didn't learn to love them, but I learned to appreciate them. And now we're going to circle it back around to music. So how does this relate to classical music? Well, classical music, I find, is an acquired taste in the same way. So if you've never had a fig, or if you've never had kale, or whatever it is, it's going to be weird and unfamiliar at first. And I feel like that's where people are coming from with classical music. A lot of us aren't exposed to it, or if we are, it's just a couple of minutes in a movie. So a lot of us are just kind of, inherently just reject it because it's unfamiliar. But like the 5-year-old with vegetables, I do think it is important for you to at least try to get a taste for classical music. So maybe like me with figs, you'll never love classical music, but I want you to be careful about ruling it out completely before you've become familiar with it enough to rule it out. I've had a lot of students over the years, mainly teenagers and adults who come to class and they're like, I don't want to learn classical music. I have no interest in it. All I want to do is learn pop music. And I'm just to me, it sounds like that kid who's like, I don't want to eat my vegetables. And in my head, I'm just thinking, oh, but it's so good for you. It's important for your health as a musician to learn these things. So I really want you to make sure you at least familiarize yourself with other genres. So to just finish this thought, the solution here is to just be open-minded. You never know what genre that you haven't explored is just lurking around the corner that's going to be your new favorite. And I don't just mean be open-minded to learn classical music. I'm talking any genre. So maybe something like jazz. Maybe you hate the first jazz piece you learn. Try another one. And then try another one, and then try 9 more, and then determine whether or not if you think jazz is right for you or not. Maybe you'll end up falling in love with jazz. It'll become your favorite. Or maybe you'll be like, you know what? This really isn't for me. Problem number 11 is performance anxiety. And I'm not just talking about performance in the sense of a recital or an exam. I'm talking about you're like, hey, significant other or friend or teacher, here's the song I've been working on. And then when you're playing, you get shaky hands, even though you're playing this for someone that you know really well who isn't judging you or isn't, I actually don't think I've ever had this is mainly This is mainly the kind of problem that plagues older learners and adults. I don't think I've ever had a kid come to class who's like really nervous to play a piece for me. I don't think I've ever seen like a kid with shake hands and they're, concerned that they're doing it right. They don't apologize for their mistakes. It's super rare if that happens. This is mainly just like an adult problem. I don't think there's an easy solution for this one because I think the root of this problem is psychological. So I'm just going to assume that your piano teacher is not like a scary person who's hitting your hands with a stick every time you make a mistake. So if we're ruling that out, then why do we get so nervous to play for our piano teacher? And I think there are a couple things in particular that are wrapped up in this. One of them is an eagerness to please. And the other one is the feeling of being judged. And I want to talk about that second one. So with regards to being judged, us adults, I think sometimes feel like it's more than just our playing ability that's being judged. It's like we're being judged as a person. Because as we talked about earlier, we get really emotionally wrapped up in the pieces that we learn because we spend so much time in them. So in a sense, it's like our self-worth gets wrapped up in this piece. So when we play it, it's not just like if we make a mistake or whatever, we're making a mistake. It's like if we make a mistake, it's like a reflection of who we are as a person. And I think who wouldn't get anxious when that's your perception, when, any little mistake, where if you play good, you're a good person. And if you play bad, then you're a bad person. I know it seems ridiculous, but I think a lot of us think this way without being aware that we're thinking this way. And again, this all comes down to the problem of not being able to separate yourself from your art. I think the solution might just be to separate ourselves from the music a little bit. And I know it's kind of a contradiction because on the one hand, as a musician, we're expected to pour out our hearts when we play and be really emotional. But on the other hand, that level of entrenchment in your own music leaves us feeling really vulnerable. And as we were talking about, as adults really struggle with feeling vulnerable. So I think if you suffer from performance stress, a certain amount of detachment is necessary. Like you are not the music. If you make a mistake, it does not reflect you as a person. I think you really want to try to internalize that. And this is a subject that we could talk about for a long time, and I don't want to dwell on it too much because I'm not very educated in it. I know that I experience performance anxiety, and I know that a lot of my students do, but I haven't done a lot of reading on it. So that's actually one of my goals of this year, is to learn a little bit more about performance anxiety, and then we'll talk about it in future videos, because I think it's a really important topic that a lot of us struggle with. So stay tuned for that. And the final point, problem number 12, is how you treat your piano practice is a mirror of yourself. So your self-talk is a mirror. If you're getting frustrated, take a really good look at yourself and think like, okay, what am I not seeing clearly? What is being obscured? What am I projecting? So for example, maybe you see yourself as being better than you actually are. So then you constantly give yourself music that's too challenging. And then you get frustrated because you're playing pieces that are too hard. And then you conclude that piano practice is always this like really intense struggle. Or as another example, on the other end of the spectrum, maybe you see yourself as a not very good piano player. So then you constantly underestimate yourself and you give yourself pieces that are too easy, and then you get bored, and then you conclude, well, piano practice is always going to be boring. These are just discrepancies in how we see reality. We're not seeing things clearly. We're not looking in the mirror with fresh eyes. We're being clouded by our own perceptions. You see where I'm going with this? The solution to this is to just really try to be aware of what's going on in your head when you're practicing. Trying to listen to that self-talk can be really fascinating. It's not something we often focus on, but it makes a huge impact on our overall enjoyment of being at the piano. So ultimately we want to strive for neutral, right? So we obviously don't want the self-talk to be like overly critical, because that'll make our confidence erode away and we're not going to enjoy ourselves. But at the same time, we don't want to be too forgiving. Otherwise, we'll become lax and we won't try very hard. So if your self-talk is like, you know what, you're pretty good. Who cares about those mistakes you just made? No one will notice them. It's totally fine. But yeah, aim for neutral self-talk. Try not to be too critical. Try not to be too complacent. And that is all for the 12 problems that I see adult piano players face often. I hope that you found something to connect to here and something to think about. I know that we went off on like a lot of little tangents, and maybe not all of this applies to you, but I'm really hoping that that you at least found something in here. So thank you so much for watching this video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and give this video a like if you enjoyed it and if you like these discussions. And thank you everyone who helps make these videos possible. I really appreciate all your support. You can visit me on social media like Instagram and Facebook, and I don't know why I'm singing this, Twitter. Thank you so much, and I will catch you guys next time. So blah.